Hi, everybody. It's Ron and Melody Bacon with Relationship University.
Hello.
And this is a channel where we discuss all things to do with relationships, but with specifically, we're focusing on families who are struggling with addiction or alcoholism because there's so little out there for you in terms of education, resources, support, in a tangible way. So we've designed these programs to answer typical questions or to help you think differently than you might normally have, to change some of the things you're doing that may not be helping you or the addict. So this time we want to talk a little bit about a book called The Big Book. You've
It's
probably heard about it.
actually called Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yes.
And that's the true title, but nobody calls it that.
And as you can see, it's really not
It's
that
not a
big.
pamphlet.
And yet it's not
It's
that
not huge.
but I'll tell you why it's called the Big Book. Because when it was first published, the very first copies were with thicker paper because Bill W., one of the founders of AA, recognized that probably people reading that book will be alcoholics who are often have a very difficult time turning pages because of the tremors. And so they published it on thicker paper, and it was a big book, the first copies that came out. So it just got to be called that and continues to be to this day. But you're right, the title is Alcoholics Anonymous. And the reason why we're talking about that, because most likely you aren't struggling with alcoholism or addiction. If you are, great, welcome. But even family members who have a loved one who has that disease can really benefit from the wisdom that's contained, hard-won wisdom, really, in the Big Book. And we are big proponents of al-anon and nar-anon, which are for family members of addicts and alcoholics, because there was a recognition fairly early on that they were equally in need of a community, a fellowship, support, and working their own version of what's called 12 steps.
Lois Wilson, Bill Wilson's wife, famously threw a shoe at him at one point, and she recognized just how angry she was, just how upset that he had put her through this. I mean, later on, the program helped her to see that alcohol did that.
Yeah.
And it's fair game to be angry at alcohol or drugs, chemicals. To hate them is great. To hate your loved one doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And how do you separate it out? This is not easy.
Especially since it seems like it's a choice. If you're a normie and you don't think much about alcohol, if you think a lot about alcohol and you're running your whole life around it and you're thinking about when you can have another drink, you need to switch to the AA channel, because that is the sign that alcohol is running your life. However, if you're a normie, you don't think much about whether you're going to drink or not. And it doesn't seem logical to you that anyone would choose not only to drink or use, but to do so to the point where it's life-threatening.
As Nora Volkov, she runs the National Institutes of Drug and Alcohol, she says, it's continued using in spite of catastrophic consequences. And the idea of catastrophic is, it's like, wow, even a little something, a DUI, I mean, isn't that catastrophic enough?
Yeah, I just spoke with someone, he's been in recovery for quite a number of years, and he said that all of his legal problems started when he started drinking alcohol, and they ended when he stopped.
Yeah.
So, as a normie, you're thinking, why? Why would you do that to yourself?
If this causes so much pain, why do it?
Right.
And it is, if you can see how much pain it's causing me, don't you love me enough not to do it? And that has gone through, I don't know who hasn't at least had the thought. We know it's erroneous. This is a disease. And if they could control it, they would.
In fact, that's a lot of what they are trying to do. It may
Yes.
not look like it, but willpower is something that an addict or alcoholic is not lacking. It's just that you can only use willpower for so long. It's
Yeah.
like a muscle and it's going to get tired.
Right.
And that's the issue.
Yeah.
Not that they don't want to stop, it's that they can't without recourse to, rehab and AA and, one day at a time and all the things that that you will learn once you get involved in your own program.
And we have found that family members can't stop themselves on their own from thinking about their loved one, trying to stop them from killing themselves or somebody else.
Sure.
And that is where a family member would have their own spiritual awakening. And on page 111 of the big book, it was written in the 1930s. And so the chapter titles, this one is to wives, that he was dealing mostly with men. And today we would say to partners or to spouses.
To parents.
To parent, yeah, it could be anybody that.
Family members.
So you have to do a little bit of translating that if your loved one is using an opiate or a stimulant, and they just can't find that there's enough sobriety in the groups they're going to that are special for that, they go to AA, they just translate it. So if you're doing some of the same thing, it's okay. You can get what you need. That anyway, on page 111, they list principles for family members. And the very first one is never be angry. And they're talking about the loved one going out and using again.
So, so I mean, here they are. Let's say they're an alcoholic. They just promised on a stack of Bibles they were not going to drink again. Because maybe you threatened to leave them if they ever did. And here they come. You know that they have been drinking, and now you're angry because doesn't it mean anything to you that you made a big promise to me and to God and everybody else, and you broke it, and blah, blah, blah.
In the 80s, there were programs that had people put $10,000 check written out to a charity in an envelope. If they used that check, the envelope was sent. And there were a lot of charities that got $10,000. This would be like $50,000 a day, I would think. I don't know. It was a chunk of money. And it's like, why would they do that? Because they could not stop themselves.
So what do you do as a family member with the anger?
That it's a spiritual renewal. You give it to God, and you need a God that's big enough to take it.
So if you don't get angry, though, doesn't that mean that you're kind of going along with them or, co-signing their addiction?
If you don't get angry, it may mean that you've got one foot out the door. You've already figured out how you're going to deal with this. Yeah, it's understandable. I mean, this robs you of your own vitality.
But let's say you are angry and you're trying to follow this, but
of
you saying, if I don't say anything to him, he's going to think he can get away with it.
Well, that'd be a good question if you can ask it cleanly as a question. If I don't blow up right now, will you think that I'm okay with this?
Okay. So an option to getting angry would be to say, maybe you can't say that. Maybe you can say, all you can say to your loved one is, you know what? I'm feeling really angry right now. I'm not going to say anything. We're going to talk about this tomorrow.
Yes. I'm too angry to talk about this right now. And you may have to repeat that many, many times, especially if they're currently under the influence. They don't listen to reason. They want you to listen to them, and they aren't in any position to talk.
Go sleep in the guest room. So let's say that works. They go somewhere else. Now, it's the next morning.
Yes.
Then you could say, hey, I'd like to talk about what happened last night.
Yeah. Because, well, we're ready for the next principle. And that one, I've summarized it as don't be bossy.
Okay.
You don't start telling them what they need to do.
Yeah, which is another thing that seems counterintuitive.
It does.
You need to start going to meetings. You need to call your sponsor. You need to get into rehab. Can't you see what you're doing to our family?
They may have already been in rehab, and you sat there with the case manager, and they were supposed to have a sponsor, and you need to be reading this book.
Yes.
And You know, if you have somebody who's never seen the book, they don't know anything about this book, it's okay for you to get a copy
Hmm.
and set it down
And say, hey,
and leave it alone.
yeah,
You just set it down, let them get interested in it. Do not be putting threads on it to see if they opened it. Do
right.
not be doing all this crazy stuff. The way they hid bottles of alcohol around to keep you from knowing, don't do the same thing in return in a
So
different way.
you don't get angry at them, but you could follow up with a question. What do you
Yes.
think is going on for me? That would be the first principle. The second
Mhm.
one would be don't be bossy.
Right. Don't start telling
And
them what they're
so,
going to do. You tell yourself, this is what I'm going to do.
okay, and that's what I was going to ask. So
Yes.
you're not kind of dictating to them, but then instead of doing that, what you have to do is really get clear on what you're willing to live with or not.
Yes. Yeah.
And frankly, without recourse to al-anon or nar-anon, a sponsor that's a good sponsor, and a therapist who can also help you with this, and that means somebody probably that has some experience in this field. It's difficult to do this on your
I
own.
think it's impossible.
We're trying to
Yeah.
give you the insights that we know work,
Yeah.
but unless you can have someone that can sit down with you and strategize, okay, here are some options,
Hmm.
that you can do. And this is what Ron and I do. So we both have a combined 50-year experience of being psychotherapists. And a lot of what we do with our clients is to say, okay, so let's look at your options.
Yeah, right.
One of
Right.
your options is don't say anything and just continue to live the way you are. That's always an option.
Yeah,
You may
sure.
not want it, but it's on the table. Number two, you can do what you've been doing, boss, yell, scream, and kick.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, you can keep doing that.
Hmm.
Third, you can decide, well, I don't want to do those first two. I don't know what I'm going to do yet.
Hmm.
And I'm going to tell my loved one I don't know what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
Fourth, we go to maybe you think about separating. You don't have to go to the nuclear option and file for divorce. If you separated, it would be because you're not willing to live with alcoholism or
Hmm.
addiction,
Hmm.
not because you're trying to teach
Right.
a lesson.
Right. Right. Yeah, all those things are very useful,
Hmm.
but this is about self-direction.
Right.
And to be very clean, I'm not attempting to manipulate or influence my loved one to do
Right.
what I want them to do.
I got to get my
Hey,
life. My life has become unmanageable because your life
yes,
is,
yeah.
basically. And how do I get my life back into manageability?
So within this chapter to wives, there's a section where they do talk about you may have to leave for a while.
Hmm.
And they use the language, do it without rancor.
Hmm.
And I don't know the last time I used rancor in a
Hmm.
sentence, but that would mean do it without the neighbors knowing it,
Yes.
without the cops getting called. Okay,
Yeah.
just do it
Without
factually.
anger, without
I'm,
your kids being dragged along. Your
yes.
dad's a drunken alcoholic or, blah, blah, blah. Just
Hmm.
leave with clarity
Yep.
and integrity. As right now, I'm not willing to do this. I'm not willing to live with this anymore. It's on me that I have been for all this time. And part of what helps us take a position like this is to get clear on what our own values are
Hmm.
and our principles are. And that could take some time. For example, sometimes I'm struggling with individuals who have the value of respecting their elders, their mother and father, but they also are being asked by their mother and father to do something that is also counter to another value of theirs.
Right.
And so sometimes you have to weigh out, how do I be respectful and at the same time follow what I know I need to do? And in this case, how do I get clear? Let's say you're a person who has the value of, married for life. And at the same time, you have the value of living in a sober household.
Hmm.
And living with an active alcoholic or addict is not what you signed up for, but you also don't want to summarily dissolve
Hmm.
your
Hmm.
marriage.
Hmm.
So that's where you have to, through the guidance of a therapist, a sponsor, a pastor, a rabbi, whomever, get some assistance with how do I navigate this. But as you'll notice, all of that is focusing on what you're being asked to do with
Right.
your life, not getting the other one. Yes, if that person got sober and lived a great sober lifestyle, you would not have to deal with any of this stuff. And so it makes sense to just say, gosh, if they would just
Oh,
change, right?
I start laughing because you would have to deal with the anger that you still have. And I saw that over and over again, and it
Yeah.
came as a surprise to me. And I think it often comes as a surprise to family members
Mhm.
that once the person starts doing what
Mhm.
you've wanted them to do all along, when they're finally safe, you're safe enough now to express feelings that you pushed down.
Mhm.
And, it's timing. And that's where a therapist, they will need to hear all of this stuff. Guess what? Part of their step is making amends. This
Mhm.
isn't just saying, hey, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's not
Let's
an
get over
amends.
it and
That's
move
an
on.
apology. And they're different. And your loved one, you may be asking them, when do you get to the amends part? Please ask your sponsor that.
Mhm.
Don't ask them that. So they may tell you or want to tell you, this would be the third principle. Your loved one may want to start telling you what you should be doing.
Mhm.
That now that they've got a sponsor and they're going to meetings, they may be a 12-step zealot,
Mhm.
and you should be doing this. And while it may be true, and you can say, this is your loved one talking, even if you're feeling pretty estranged from them,
Mhm.
you share property, you share children, you
Mhm.
share a lot of history, and take it under advisement. I'll think about what you said, and then do it. That doesn't mean do what they said.
Mhm.
I'm going to think about it.
So there's the three principles.
Yes.
And what are they again?
Never be angry, and which means you're going to have a spiritual renewal,
Mhm.
and you'll have to have help with that one. Don't get bossy was
Okay.
the second one, and don't let them get bossy with you.
Okay.
Those are my words, not
Yes.
the big books, but that's basically what they're saying.
So those are some good principles to be thinking about in terms of how do you relate to someone who's an alcoholic addict? How do you start to manage your own feelings and manage your life differently? So we will continue to have these discussions online. Please like us, share on Facebook or wherever. We also have a wonderful program called Family Matters, and it's for families who are struggling with addiction, and it's online, so you don't have to go to a specific place and a specific time. And you can find it at relationshipuniversity.teachable.com. That's relationshipuniversity.teachable.com, and you'll just sign up for free for the school, and then Family Matters, you'll see that listed as an option. And we hope that you will take advantage of the opportunity to take a deeper dive into these very complex topics. And in addition to the course materials and the videos and all the things we offer in that course, we have a closed Facebook group for the Family Matters community to be able to share with each other in a safe environment that's, has some parameters to it. In the meantime, we hope that you will also, if you're not already an al-anon or nar-anon, that you will find a good group for yourself and find a good therapist as well.
But we're not telling you to do it.
We're not. We're just suggesting that might be a good idea.
Absolutely.
All right.